I have to confess one thing
Uh-oh.
about Goesan. I actually didn't know how famous the Goesan chili pepper is. I only see the statue. I still remember the
Yes.
very big chili pepper statue when I traveled there, and I was so surprised.
They're really proud of it.
And I don't know, when I heard the word Goesan, it just remind me of you all the time. You are the one of representative person of Goesan. Shout out to Goesan. Kayla will be the one of the foreign representative
Mhm.
of the place. Hello, Kayla. Hello. Welcome to
Hello.
the podcast. Like living in Korea. How have you been?
I've been good. Busy with work. I'm
Mm-hmm.
an ESL teacher here in the United States in New Jersey. So it's been busy, 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 but I'm doing okay.
Okay, sounds cool. I know you are always busy because you studied your job recently,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
So, yeah, okay. By the way, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for
Yeah.
inviting me. I feel honored.
Okay, so for these podcast listeners, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I can. My name is Kayla. I'm currently in New Jersey of the United States. I am an ESL teacher in the public school system in one of the areas in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I have lived in South Korea for 3 years, and I just came back last year to the United States. Actually, no, I apologize. 2 years ago. I like to travel. I visited many countries while I was in South Korea, but also before going to South Korea. I love coffee. As you can see, I have coffee right here from Dunkin' Donuts, and I like cats.
Okay, thank you for your introduction. Very nice. Wow, interesting. You lived in Korea for 3 years.
Yes.
How was it?
It was great. I had a really good time. I think what helped me adapt more into the culture is I visited 2 years prior during the summer. And so I was able to understand more the culture, the language, the people. So when I came to officially move and teach in South Korea, it wasn't too much of a culture shock.
Mhm.
I had some experience. It was a little bit of a culture shock being in my small town in
Mhm.
Goesan.
Mhm.
Many people, including Korean people, don't know where that is, or I've heard of it slightly. So it's in the North Chungcheong province, Chungcheongbuk
Mhm.
province,
Yeah,
and it's
Chungcheongbuk
just,
province.
yeah, really small but beautiful. The sunrises, the sunsets were beautiful, and it was such a quiet, cute little town that I actually do
Mhm.
miss when I look through my photos.
Okay. Actually, you introduced your place, Goesan, in Korea, where you stayed in. And as you pointed out, actually, I heard that place before in my life, but if you didn't live there, I
Mm.
think I've never had a chance to visit there in my life. So it
Yeah.
was a special moment. And can you explain more about Goesan? We're going to talk
Mm.
about your Korean experience later, but we want to know about where Goesan is and what is the most popular things in there, something like that. So, yeah, explain more about there.
From what I remember from our lessons, I know san means mountain. I
Hmm.
forget what Gue means. So I just know that Goesan means there's a lot of mountains or it's surrounded by mountains. I'm not sure what the Gue part of Goesan
I
means.
have to check about it actually. What is Goesan means?
I remember from our lesson, I only remember the san.
Huh? Yeah, San is mountain, obviously.
Yeah.
And what is Gue?
And and it's really
Go ahead.
oh so Goesan is a small province, a small town. It's not
Hmm.
even a city, but it's not like a rural village. So it's a town.
Hmm.
And there is a bus that goes directly to Seoul, so we're not excluded from everyone else. We can take a bus to Cheongju, which is the capital of Chungcheongbuk-do,
Hmm.
the North Chungcheong province. And it's filled with a lot of older people. It's an agricultural farming town as well as the other towns next to them. It's just very beautiful. Like when I first came, it wasn't being developed, but as I was living there, they like redid the bridge that crossed from one side to the other, and there's a stream. Goesan is known for the chili peppers. So
Mm,
every year they do a chili pepper festival, which I attended, and it was a great highlight of my time of connecting with my town because
mm,
I got to see the people, I got to see my students and their families, and it was really nice because the people in Goesan are very kind. And
mm.
anytime I went into a establishment or a store, they always tried to speak any English they know, and it was really nice because even if it was just like hello or thank you, made me feel very welcomed. And they would always see me and say "Haseyo" or "hello," and it just Goesan is a very warming community, and I miss it so much.
Okay. Shout out to Goesan people.
Yeah. Woo! If you ever wanna go, I really recommend. There's also, like, little valleys that you can go swimming
Mhm,
in the summer. There's a hiking trail, Sanmaki Yetgil, which is the old Sanmaki road that me and my friend Simone, who will be featured soon, we went hiking, and it wasn't and then if you really like hiking, I wouldn't recommend because it's a very calming hike, so it's very, like, just flat, which I love because I don't like hiking, but it was beautiful. You can take a little ferry from one side to the other. So Goesan has a lot of nature-esque views,
mm.
activities, that I really recommend.
Okay. Wow. It sounds so wonderful place. I should travel there once again with my kids.
It's a hidden gem. It's a hidden
Yeah.
gem.
What was the place? I totally didn't get your word. The Yetsan Makil?
The Sanmaki Yetgil?
Makiyekil. Okay. I'm gonna write down in our subtitle and then just to people to recognize the place. Okay. For the listeners, I just look up this word Kwesan and san, as Kayla explained it, it means mountain in Korean, and Kwe is actually coming from the one certain type of tree. The tree protect the devil in Korea. So what is it? Its English name is very mouthful. Stephen, no, I can maybe. Anyway, something Japonicum?
Tree?
Ponicum? Yeah, Japonicum tree. It's almost impossible to pronounce it.
Does it have Carpinus japonica?
No, Stephen, anyway, so
I'm curious now.
yeah, let me share it with you through Kakao Talk here. Can you
Yeah.
share?
Even as a native English speaker, I can't even say that word.
Yeah, I'm gonna put the tree's name in our video, so no worries at all. Anyway, so this tree is very special in Korea. Like this tree especially protected the devil in Korea.
Mm,
So maybe the mountain, maybe, I'm not sure, but there are some the devils on the bad ghost. So just to put
mm,
these trees around the mountain, and
mhm.
maybe the place is safe for the people. Maybe something comes from that story, but I have to look up more later and then just to put in our video.
Yeah,
Okay.
it'll be cool to show the listeners about the Korean folktales
Yeah.
and how embedded it is in the Korean culture, which I really like.
Okay. I'm feeling a little guilty because I didn't prepare for that part, but I'm gonna do it as my one of homeworks.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Kayla, so in Goesan, you
Yes.
worked as English teacher, right?
Yes.
So how was it? What was your experience of English teacher in public school there?
So I was at, it might have changed, but my school, I worked at three schools.
Hmm.
I had two middle schools and one elementary school. My main school that I'm assigned to, I believe it was a boarding school. So it was where all the troubled students went.
Mm,
So the first 6 months were a bit difficult because there were a lot of students who had behavior issues or had like really sad
mm,
family situations. So I tried to come in with like positivity, fun to make English specifically, but education enjoyable because for them, they might think that they're here as a punishment. And I didn't
mm,
want them to think that at all. So it was a little challenging because I did not know any Korean. I knew very basic. And when I say basic, I mean hello, thank you, and goodbye. That was as far as I knew. And many of the staff teachers were very friendly towards me, but they were also very shy as well because
Mhm.
many of
Mm.
them know English, but they're afraid to practice. So they get very shy. But teaching in Korea is very different because it's very structured and fast paced. Korean education system want really good scores.
Mhm.
But what I liked about my school is because it was a boarding school, the students lived there Monday through Friday. And they did a lot of activities for them, a lot of outside activities, trips, creativity, which I really liked, wood shop. And so I think it allowed the students to gain different skills and to connect more with nature than in
Mhm.
it just going to school and then going back home. And
Mhm.
the students really became family because they lived in the dormitory. Some of the
Mhm.
teachers lived in the dormitory, so they became really close knit. And when they lived in a village, so the school was in a village. So the bus only came like 6 times a day to
6 times
to
a day.
Goesan.
Okay.
So from that village to Goesan was only like 6 times a day, maybe eight, depending if it's the weekend. And then for them to go to Cheongju, they had to go from the village, like the school village, to Goesan to Cheongju. So I think a lot of them understood the importance of making the school their home during that
Mhm.
time.
Mm.
And I did, even though there were like misbehaved students, they still respected me and the other teachers. And they really like, there's a term in English called Velcro kids, which is
Mhm.
when students like attach to a certain teacher or teachers and they always follow them, always like talking to them, always asking them, like, how you doing? Oh, do you need help? Like, I have a little treat for you. I had a couple of
Mm.
those. So that was really
Mm.
nice. So they always helped me carry my stuff. They were like my little mini teacher assistants. So that was really nice. And it just helped me go deeper into the school culture of my main school.
Okay. Wow. It's a pretty good experience based on
Yes.
your speaking. So yeah, I'm so happy to hear that. By the way, our today's main topic is about Korea's English education,
Mm,
right? So I think your experience is so relatable.
mm.
So we're gonna talk more about it more in detail. So what is your main thought about Korea's English education system? So in general, is it good or is it bad? Pros and cons?
I think it's good and I think it's
Mm-hmm.
not so good. I think it depends on the school,
Mm-hmm.
how much funding they have, who the teachers are, because in my school, I was the only one besides the Korean teacher teaching English. And so I was the cultural part, which was great, but I also am not a certified teacher. So there were certain things
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had learned in school or through like a more in-depth course so that I could teach my students deeper instead of surface level. So instead of just saying like, good morning, how are you? How's everything? They could have understood deeper cultural stuff or like why certain sentences were the way they are. But in middle school, I know they learn three languages. So they're not only learning English. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry about my
No, it's
notification.
a fine.
They learn English, Japanese, and Chinese or Hanja.
Mm.
So it's difficult because some students prioritize Japanese over English and others prioritize Hanja over English and some English over the other two. So I think there's a lot of stress in the education system, especially English, to do well on performance and to learn all these languages when I think they should give them time to actually just focus in on one language to
Mm.
further develop it. Because I had students
Mm.
who were really good at Japanese and didn't know anything in English, and then vice versa. They knew a lot of English, but not enough Hanja, which is very important in Korean. I think that should be number one. Um,
Yeah, I agree with you.
yeah, because that's culture and that's history, and that's important as a Korean to know why certain words are the way they are, where they came from, because it goes back to your name, to your family name, to just all the way back to history. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
should be important no matter what. But then they get to choose English or Japanese or even
Mm-hmm.
Mandarin if they want to go into that. So, but I think the stress level in Korea is very bad because they very bad. They study until even post university they continue studying.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think a lot of Koreans use their English. Like you, I feel like are an exception because you really learned it and taught yourself and continued it. And I know your job kind of put you in a position to learn more as
Mm,
well, which is
mm.
great. But there are a lot of Koreans who know English, but the fact that they are nervous or see not being perfect as a failure really makes them not take advantage of their potential.
Yeah, you point out a couple of things I wanted to discuss more. I don't know where I to start, but we're gonna talk one by one.
Okay.
First of all, the second language. As you explained it, I also think the Chinese character is the number one student definitely learn here in
Mm.
Korea, right? But I heard that this day it is just optional. It's not a yeah. How can I explain it? The mandatory the second language for the student. But when I went to the school, the Chinese character is always mandatory. I also got a certification.
Also,
Yeah. So when I was high school student, I don't know why, but the Chinese character was very booming. So everybody learned and tries to remember the most of Chinese characters. It helped me a lot to understand more about our language, Korean. Not also Korean actually, but the other language like the Japanese and Chinese the everything actually the root of the language from these countries is actually coming from the China. I mean Chinese. Once we learn about how to pronounce it and how to understand the meaning of the Chinese character, we can easily imply what the word and expression means, even though the language is different from Japan and China. So Chinese character is very important for student in Korea, but I think it is not that very considered as important as when I studied in
mm,
school. So I'm so sad. And also, I'm not sure. I have to check the figure, but as far as I know, maybe the 70 or 60% of Korean words are coming from the Chinese character. Yeah. As you said, that
mhm,
our name is basically based on our Chinese character. My parents and my family, everybody. And also most of the words actually comes from the Chinese character. So if we understand how to read and what the Chinese character means, it is very helpful to understand the meaning of the word. So our language, knowledge is much better, but I don't know why the system, I mean, the Chinese character is not that very important these days. That's the
that's
one
a great
thing.
question.
Yeah, I wanted to talk, right? So as far as I understand, my parents' generation, they always see the Chinese character on their newspaper and books. So yeah, it is not optional. They have to read and know the Chinese character. And as I said, even though they don't study Japanese and Chinese, but they can understand what the word and expression means actually.
Mhm.
So it was really beneficial for them. But these days, the student doesn't want to learn Chinese. I don't know, they doesn't want or the education system doesn't provide the importance to the students. Anyway, this is one of the controversial situation in Korea these days. But
Mhm.
I bet my kiddos, they have to learn Chinese characters for their better language and understanding of our language.
I think it also goes back to identity.
Hmm.
Identity as a Korean. And when people ask questions, they're able to know maybe not the full answer, but something. And
Hmm.
people really admire when you know the history or the meaning
Hmm.
or the reason behind the certain words or
Hmm.
cultures or stuff because it shows your connection with your country. That's how I see it.
Yeah, definitely. Kayla, I don't want to derail our today's topic, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna make this adding maybe.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. What I want to say, I almost forgot. I want to say the one. I might think these days the language is evolving, right?
Hmm.
So what I observed from the Gen Z generation is that they speak a bunch of Konglish rather
Hmm.
than the old word and old expression. So recently, what I observed is that the most of words seems to come from the English. So maybe we consider English is more important than Chinese character. How do you think about it? Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. In the beginning, when I was hearing more Konglish in the school, I was like, oh, that's cool. Like they're learning English in a different way, in a different capacity.
In a different way. Okay.
In a Korean way, they Koreanified it. So I guess that's okay. But if you said 70%?
I think so, but I have to check the figure. Yeah, 70 or 60%.
Well, I think if it's over 30%, that's a lot to replace the Korean language with Konglish. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it's different if you're speaking in Korean and you use Korean words with someone who knows Korean and English, because then you're having a multilingual conversation, which is very
Mm-hmm.
good because you're using your brain to navigate two languages. But if you're just replacing the Korean word with the English word, then that's because then soon that 70 will become 100%, or 90%, and that's not good. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
it's good. If it were 30%, okay, but if it's 70, that's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. So anyway, what is the most shocking Konglish that you hear in Korea? You have a lot. I know some of things you were shocked.
What's the, men to men?
Man to man t-shirts. The
Yes.
man to man. Yeah, sweat, sweat t-shirts. Yes.
Yeah. I That was weird. I know it's not Konglish, but the fact that that's the name.
Mm.
I mean, robot.
라디오, 로보트. Mm.
I can't remember other Konglish words, but when it comes to technology, do you remember if there was a Korean word for it, or was it borrowed, like
We
Konglish?
borrow, always borrow the word. We have a bunch of loan word like the computer,
Mm,
laptop,
mm.
desktop, hand.
Because I also wonder if most of the Konglish words, loan words, just come from a area like technology that we didn't
Most
have
of it.
back then. And so when technology was being invented, instead of making up a word in your language, in a Korean language, maybe they just borrowed it because it's easier. Because
Mm,
it was already invented, maybe. That's my
yeah,
guess.
yeah. So that's a really good point because, as you said, the new word is mostly we just get from the technology things. So that's the main reason we just have the wrong word, but we pronounce it a little different. So that's
Mm,
the main issue. I don't want to say it is issue, but sometimes it makes the conversation very tricky when we speak it with the foreign people.
mm,
One story I have recently is also related to the Konglish things.
mm.
So one of my coworkers, he worked in Costco,
Okay.
but I actually didn't understand where he worked. Because in Korea, everybody says Costco, four
Mm,
syllables. So
mm,
he tries to make me understand where he worked in, but
mm,
I, can't understand. So he just wrote down the word and then I realized it is Costco in Korean,
mm.
but he said Costco in English way. So it was the most shocking Konglish that I've learned.
That one's funny because the same with, remember Starbucks? Starbucks.
Starbucks, Starbucks, yes.
And the other one I can never get, so all the listeners, I'm not gonna even try, but for I can't even say it in English. Tour le jour? I can't even say it in English. Yeah, in Spanish, forget about it. Korean, sorry. I cannot even say it. That was difficult. Even to this day, I can't even say it.
Mm.
But two words I would like to say is air conditioning. So in Korean, it's
Mm.
aircon.
Aircon.
I use it all the time here in the United States. And at first,
Really?
I do. I think it's easier, aircon or AC, but I think aircon is better. And I'll use it, and some of my coworkers are like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "No, the aircon,
Aircon.
the fan." They're like, "Oh, no, I still don't know." I'm like, "Oh, the air conditioning. Sorry." And the other one, PPT.
PPT.
Yes,
Oh, what is
PowerPoint.
the word? PowerPoint.
Maybe I made
I
it up,
use PPT.
but PPT. I use it all the time instead of saying PowerPoint. I'm like, "Oh, did you make the PPT?" And my coworker,
Mm.
he said, "What is a PPT?" And I said, "PowerPoint." And they're like, "I have never heard of that or used that." I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna use it all the time, but It's just a shortened version of PowerPoint. You're like, oh.
Yeah.
So I love using PPT. I think it's easy.
Okay. Kayla, you sound so Korean before you said PPT and aircon.
Those are my favorite two words.
I have a one question. What is deck, by the way? Deck is also meaning like the PowerPoint things in English term because when I work in a American company, they
Mhm.
always say, "Did you make the deck?" And it means like the PowerPoint, like something the paper which needs to present in front of people, something like that. So we always wonder, and I actually searched the words on
Mhm.
a Wikipedia and the dictionary. It means like the sum of the pile of papers, something like that. Deck. But I
Oh,
don't
did you
know
make the
actually.
deck?
Deck,
Okay.
yeah, DECK.
Did you make the deck? How old is this person?
I don't know.
Because I don't use that.
Mm,
Did you make the deck? That's a good question. I don't know if that's an older generation or if that's
yeah,
like a
maybe the old
specific,
one.
yeah, or a specific field than like
Maybe
business
it's
people.
maybe kind of the jargon when
Yeah.
people use it in the IT industry. But I
Mhm.
need to check it once again. Maybe the chat GPT will teach me.
Yeah. It's helpful.
Okay. So let's go back to your uh, life in Korea. I mean, we talked about your uh, life as English teacher, right? So
Mhm.
one thing, I'm an old people, not that very old, but when
You're
it comes to the
young.
I think I am not eligible to talk about the current English education system. But when I was middle school and high school
Mhm.
student, actually, we don't have this kind of position like the native English speaking, teacher.
Mm.
So we just only have like the local English teacher. And I don't want to make them bad, but now when I recalled how I got taught by the English teacher, they were so wrong. Yeah, they always taught us like the grammar things, and they never taught us how to read and speak out English. So I have a one story. I actually taught English to the student when I was university student because the one student she actually studied for the SAT in Korea. So her mom was my mom's friend.
Mm.
So her mom asked me to teach some English to her. So at the first day, we read the book together and I still remember that. She really acted like that. Why your pronunciation is so bad?
Wow.
Yeah,
Rude.
yeah, but rude. But I understand because I actually didn't speak out when I study English. So back then, when I high school student, I remembered over 3,000 English vocab. Yeah, I remembered how to write and how to read and what does it mean. But the only problem was that I never speak out. Yeah, so my mouth doesn't work very well when I want to speak out the words. So my listening, reading, grammar, were pretty good. I got a good score, but the problem was that I cannot speak.
Yeah.
So that was the problem that I have. And even when I was university student, I never had the chance to speak out. But when I went to the company, I should be survived there. So my manager always pushed me to speak English. Yeah, that's the here I am. Anyways,
Yeah. And here you are.
yeah, that's my story. And I think everybody suffers the same thing. Like my generation, everybody studied the same education for the English. So it was so bad, I think. So comparison to my generation, how do you think about it these days in Korea? Is it much better or you still think Korea should adapt to the different type of education system, something like that. Just to tell me whatever you
It
think.
also, again, it goes back to the school
Mm,
and where they are because I'm in Chuncheongbuk-do, which is
mhm,
considered an agricultural province. And if you compare it to Seoul, it's completely different. Like in Seoul, the students, like, especially high school students,
Mm-hmm.
do like 12-hour or 15-hour days of studying, while in the countryside, they still do that, but it depends on the school. So I think it's great that they brought us to the schools, the native English speaker teachers, because I do agree that that is helpful with communication, with speaking, with listening, even.
Mm-hmm.
Because at times I had students try to correct me on a word, and I'm like, I appreciate you defending yourself and speaking up because this is what you thought the word was pronounced, but actually I'm the native English teacher. I know what the correct pronunciation is. So I'm going to help you so you don't make the same mistake when speaking with other foreigners in
Mm-hmm.
English. But I loved when the students didn't just accept what I said. If they felt like the word they were saying was correct, I would explain to them, I understand, but unfortunately, English is such a tricky language that sometimes what you see is not what is pronounced. And you know
I,
this.
I have
It's so
something to tell
annoying.
you.
It's annoying because you're like, "Ugh, I thought this rule applied here, and it does, but because English, unfortunately, unlike Korean, where it comes from the Chinese characters, English is borrowed from multiple languages. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really difficult to follow the rules because it could be a French rule or a German rule or a Dutch rule or a Latin rule for people learning English. Students are more adaptable, they're able to absorb more than an adult English learner, but it's still confusing and sometimes you just want to give up. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's great they brought us. I think they should continue that because it really does open a door for allowing students to practice their pronunciation, their reading levels. Because you're right, at least from 2 years ago, Korean students know how to read, know how to write, can kind of listen. It depends on their Korean teacher as well, because
Mm-hmm.
some of my co-teachers had really good pronunciation. Others could not even speak English, even though they were teaching English.
Mm-hmm.
So it really does depend on their Korean English teacher as well. And if you're surrounded by Korean all the time, and if you're watching Korean, if you're reading in Korean too in your other subjects, it's hard to continue that practice of learning or speaking English. So some
Mm-hmm.
students, do private tutoring, which is good, but not every student can afford that. And if you're in a really rural town and I'm the only foreigner that is an English native speaker,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to meet other foreigners in your town or province, um, and speak to them.
Okay. Kayla, by the way, do you think your extense, I mean, the teaching was so, how, I think I am going to make this editing, but okay. My question was that, how did you think about it? I mean, the English native speaker is so valuable for the countryside students, I do
Mm,
believe, but was it really beneficial for them? I mean, they, as you said, it's a little tricky to explain, but I don't want to make it controversial. But the countryside student, as you said, they are not that very focusing on studying, right?
mhm,
Maybe even though they have really the valuable people like you, the native speaker in the countryside, but they treat you a little, invaluable
mhm,
the person, something like that. Maybe they just, even though they know how they want to improve their English things, but they don't know how to make the relationship with you, something like that.
mm.
So, how was your feeling? Did really, do you know what I mean? I mean,
Like
yeah, the countries,
like my experience being in a countryside school and some of the students not valuing my role like that,
uh,
like
yeah,
as a or
kind
taking advantage of speaking English like that.
Kind of. So my my point, my bottom line is like even though they have you like native speaking English teacher, but I think they don't know how to use you.
Mm,
So they have really valuable person and maybe they recall when they're the high school and they regret it why I didn't to
yeah.
make a really good relationship with native speaker English teacher, something like that. So my question is that how did you feel that they always shy to you or they actually didn't use you as much as they can? Is
Like
it
you
tricky
said,
question?
yeah, because like the elementary school students use me a lot.
Mm.
So I think it also depends on their mentality. So like the little kids,
Mm-hmm.
even if they didn't know a lot of English, they still tried. And even if they
Mm-hmm.
spoke to me in Korean and I would respond in English, they were still learning. So I did notice elementary students took advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be like, "성생님, 성생님, teacher, teacher." And then they'll ask me a question in Korean, and if I don't understand, I would turn to one of their classmates who knew more English, and they would translate it. So,
Mm.
unfortunately, I don't think it's unfortunately. Fortunately, those who had a higher English level, took advantage of that, or were put in a situation to use it more than their classmates. So I think
Mm-hmm.
they benefited more. And I think the students who had lower English levels still benefited, but they didn't know, like you said, they didn't know how to. So they reverted back to Korean, but they were improving their listening. They just didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the words to speak. So I do think many of my middle school students probably will regret in high school, especially if they don't have a native English teacher
Mm-hmm.
in high school. They're gonna be like, "Oh my gosh." But my second middle school, my co-teacher, she took advantage of me. So
Mm.
I think the co-teacher should take advantage of their native English teachers. She took advantage of me and she's like, "I want you to teach them not from the book, because I will do that. I want you to teach them cultural experiences, such as like if they
Mm-hmm.
went to the doctor, if they went to the convenience store, if they were lost or navigating a subway station, things that they may not think now, but in the future they can remember those
Yeah.
vocabulary or phrases." And I told her, I said, "I really appreciate you taking, and not in a negative way, but in a positive way, using me to the fullest." And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, "Because these students are from a rural school and we don't know how long we will have a native English teacher with us, because they could cancel these schools and send you to somewhere else. So I want
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that the students that are here that I'm working with and that you're here working with me have that exposure," which was great
Mm-hmm.
because they actually did improve their English by the time they were first year in middle school to third year, and they did improve.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think it's a combination of the school and my co-teacher and the students' willingness to take advantage, but I also education Korean education feature I don't like is that they do not allow students to kind of speak their mind at
Mm.
times, like one mind, one class kind of thing. So only the rarity. So if there's 25 kids, maybe 3 or 4 will actually speak their mind and everyone else won't.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that also hinders the students' ability to speak up and take advantage of what they have around them, because they're not told directly, but subconsciously they know they can't speak up or
Mm-hmm.
don't go out of line or
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your experience and thought. It is really, yeah, the good point, I think. The reason why I asked about it, when I think about my school experience, they took a really big advantage from you. Yeah, there was no English native speaker at all when I studied in English when I was young. But these days, even countryside, they have native English speakers teacher, and they really have a really great chance to speak their things out with. So I was a little envy.
yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to say. By the way, now you are working as ESL teacher.
Yes.
So, what is the main difference when you teach your things with Korean student and your students?
Hmm.
How many different nation and countries student are you now studying?
So in my classrooms, I have 3 classrooms that I service into. And in my school, we have 7 periods a day, but I only teach
Mm-hmm.
6 because one of them is a prep period to prepare my materials or lessons. So 4 of the 6 are English classes, English language arts. And in those 4 classes, which is 2 grades, they're all Spanish speaking students. So it's a
Mm.
bilingual Spanish class, so everyone comes from a Spanish speaking country. most of them from Ecuador, and
Mm-hmm.
their levels are different too. So in the United States, we take a test called Access,
Mm-hmm.
and that determines their level, their English level, whether they're a 1, which is really low, 2, they're emerging, 3, they're entering, and then 4 is really good, and then 4.5, they go to an English speaking classroom.
Mm.
So it's actually like the same in Korea because I have students who know more English and others who know more Spanish. So when they come to me and ask me questions, it's either in English or Spanish. One thing I do have that I didn't have in Korea is I do know Spanish, so I'm able to
Mm-hmm.
understand my students. But that's bad too because then I will respond to them in English when in reality I should force them to ask me in English.
Mm.
So it's good and bad.
Yeah,
Um
good and bad. You have to
yeah.
make the balance.
Yes, because in Korea, I in year 2 and year 3, I learned more Korean. So, like, some of the words they were saying or the questions they were asking me, I knew. Like, "Can I go to the bathroom?" I know that. Or, like, when they ask a question about what we're doing, I was able to respond in English, which is helpful for those who really don't know any English. But if they do know English, they need to start practicing using the language and the words they know. So, in my current job, it's the same, like, not the same, it's very similar where I have students who know English, who don't know as much English. But the
Mm.
difference is when I taught in Korea, I taught listening and speaking portions of the book. Here, I bring differentiated work to the students. So if we're learning about one class, we're reading a novel. So some students may not know all the English words, so I can provide a word bank of
Mm.
the English word in Spanish, and so they're able to
Mm-hmm.
follow along. While another student, I would probably provide sentence frames, so how to start a sentence when they're writing their essay. So
Mm.
I bring different materials to meet them at their level, but not to dumb it down or water it down. That's the term we use here is we don't water it down.
Uh-huh.
So we don't make it too simple. We just provide a different resources to meet them where they're at.
Mm.
So like my level 3s, I won't help them unless they come to me. So they have to ask me for help. I won't go to them. Level 2s, I provide sentence starters, so like how to start their sentences. And then level 1s, I give them a dictionary, I give them a word bank, I give them options to complete the assignment. So instead of an essay, maybe like 5 paragraphs, they'll write 1 paragraph and then draw a picture to kind of
Mm.
balance it. So that's the difference is it's more providing more resources here
Yeah,
in my school than in Korea. It was
right.
just teaching the material with a game at the end, like a
Mm-hmm.
PowerPoint game to make it more fun. And here it's more academic.
I see. Okay. It sounds more difficult because you have to put your effort to more person to person, and also it
Mhm.
sounds more customized, the teaching style. But when you taught English in Korea, as you explained it, is more focusing on the fun things like the reading and doing some games. So it sounds more activity maybe.
Yes, more active participation and
Mm-hmm.
in Korea and like I've really focused a lot on speaking. So we did a lot of
Mm-hmm.
partner work, group work, game like part review games that made them speak. And they really enjoyed it and they participated a lot. But here in my school in the US, I don't have the flexibility to do that
Mm.
because one thing I don't like about the US, at least my district
Uh-huh.
curriculum is it's very fast paced too
Mm.
and they're leaning more towards performance based like academics instead of
Mm.
digesting the information. So by the
Ah.
time me and my co-teacher are able to explain the lesson and dive deep into it, the next day we have to focus on a different part. And so there's not enough
Mm.
time to allow my students to digest the information and understand it before we move on to the next lesson. So I don't
Okay.
like that about our current
Oh,
curriculum.
okay. I was about to ask you the which way of teaching style you prefer to, but now I know. So, okay. Kayla, how about the Korean students' character?
Hmm.
When you compare with your current student, what is the observed identity or any characteristic things? Maybe Korean is more something, or your current student is more something. maybe you can that fig.
Hmm. Korean students are very respectful.
Sorry for that.
You're good.
This is home IoT.
Yeah.
I set up 11 o'clock just to turn off the light.
Okay. That's good though.
Yeah.
Efficiency.
I'm a IT person, you know.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
I
sorry.
see it. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Okay, so all right. So based on your experience, what is the observed Korean students' character and any identity you maybe the compared to your country students? The Korean student is doing something like that, or your country student is doing something like that. Maybe you can just describe it.
Korean students are more respectful
Mm-hmm.
about their area, about their belongings and their classroom. My students now.
Mm-hmm.
And here in the American culture, students, unlike Korean students, don't really have jobs. Like in Korea, they had jobs to sweep the classroom, to take out the trash, to clean the bathrooms, make sure there's, no food, anything. Here in the US, they don't have that. It's up to the teacher to do that. But here in
Mm.
Korea, it was expected you had a classroom duty. And so I really feel like that role of students having jobs instilled a sense of like responsibility, of being respectful, of caring deeply about their learning environment, while in the States is not like that. I feel
Mm.
like a mom at my job because
Yeah.
many times the
You nag a
students
lot.
I do, and they look at me and give me side eyes, and I'm like, I know your mom tells you to do this at home, so what makes you think you shouldn't do this at school either?
Mm.
So like one of the jobs is three students, and I decided this week. I split them up to on certain days they have to go and get breakfast, and they bring it up to
Mm.
our classroom. And once we're done with breakfast, they take the bin down. But they were fighting over it, like, why me? Why can't it be this student or that student? I'm like, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, doing. And so they speak up more, and they like
Mm.
question, which is good, that freedom to question and think. But
Yeah.
at times it's like you've been doing it for 2 months and now you question it. Just do it. So I banter a lot more with my students than I did in Korea. But yes, Korean students are much more respectful, have a responsibility. However, in English, they're shy. They're much more shy. Yeah. I mean, I don't have anything bad to say about the typical
Mhm.
Korean student. I do know that they're more stressed and the
Mhm.
expectations for them are higher than my current students. Like if my
Yeah.
students don't go to university or college, that's fine. There's different jobs they can do, like electrician, plumbing, they can go to trade school. But in
Mm.
Korea, it's like you have to get into the best university, you have to get the best score. The goal is to get into those three Ivy League schools, but if you go
Yeah.
to one of the sister schools, that's okay because you want to go to a good office job. Or if you speak English really well or Japanese, going to Japan or an English speaking country and making a name for yourself in those areas. So there's a lot of
Mhm.
pressure. So not only are students respectful and have responsibility, but I also feel like they aren't able to express themselves and relax. I don't think they can relax until they
Yeah.
get that office job. But even in that office job, you have to wait years because you're working night shifts or working overtime and you can't relax until you're at a stable place in your life. But that could take like 5 years after you start the job. And I don't like that because
Yeah.
it's so much stress on Korean students. And
Yeah. The
yeah.
Korean student is so bad because I also feel the same things when I studied something, you know. And as you pointed out, I think every Korean student has the same goal. I
Mhm,
think that's the problem. So that makes everybody very competitive
mhm.
because there are not the very, the few good university in Korea, but everybody's goal is enter the same university. I think that makes people really stressed. And also, I'm not sure, but not these days, but when I was a university student, the public officer was the number one dreaming job here in Korea. So everybody studied the being like the public staff, the public officer. So a couple of the university friends, they also studied that and actually failed because it was so competitive. It's almost impossible to get a job.
Yeah.
and to pass the exam. So still, I heard that the many of the Korean people, they want to be like the public officer job, and they are studying at a very small place in the Noryangjin. You may heard about that place. The place is like the academic place. So there are a bunch of academic places and the Kushiwon, like the very small type of rooms and buildings, and they are just sleeping there within very the small area, like just only one square, something like
Mhm.
that. And they just staying and studying and eating and stayed over average 2 years, and then just to get a chance to be like the public officer. But it's not
Okay.
that everybody, just only 30% or 20% of people they can just
Oh,
to
that's
pass the
low.
exam. Yeah, yeah, very low percent of the getting a job. I think that's the main problem these days in
Mhm.
Korea. Everybody has the same goal, same purpose, and same dreaming. So it makes the Korea very stressful and competitive.
I think it's a society pressure. Um,
Hmm.
because society wants the best of the best. And in the US, it is a little bit of society pressure, but it's if you're like a lawyer, then the lawyer society pressure, or a doctor
Mm,
or a teacher. So it's in that field you're in. But most of the pressure comes from family in the
mm,
US, instead of society. Because like once you become in that role, then it's society, but of that field. But in the Korea, it's not only family, but it's mostly society
society
pressure.
as well. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Like, for all the listeners out there, one thing I winter time in Korea is crazy because everyone is wearing the same thing. Everyone wears the same work outfit, gym outfit,
Mm-hmm.
winter jacket, so it's just a sea of
Mm-hmm.
black, white, maybe gray coats, and then if you see a pop of
Maybe gray
color.
coat. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
If you see a pop of color, it's like, "Who is that? Why are you" So that's one thing I've noticed and I remember is the fact that everyone wears basically the same thing too, like the same 3 colors, black, white, and gray, with the occasional, like, green or blue, but yeah.
Oh, I'm feeling so guilty now. I'm wearing the black t-shirt. So, oh my god.
Yeah, I'm wearing black too. I was gonna wear a blue one, but I was like, "Nah, I'll stick with black."
Okay. All right. That's a really good observation. Okay. Kayla, let's just switch the gear.
Okay.
I want to know why you made a decision to continue your job in Korea. So,
Mm.
what brought you to Korea, and how did you start working as English teacher in Goesan, especially?
Actually, Goesan was not my first choice. I did not know it existed. I wanted Incheon. I actually wanted
Mm,
Seoul, but I knew many native English teachers wanted Seoul. So to
mm.
not cut me off of getting.
Competition again.
Yes, yeah. So always competition. I chose Incheon. Look at that. I went to Chungcheongbuk-do. No matter what I picked, it didn't work out. But
Mm,
I mentioned before that in 2019 I came to South Korea through a missions trip through my church. And so at that time, we had two girls who were our translators. Shout out to
mm,
Grace and Samsung. Um, I became really close with them and we became very close friends. We're best friends. And so 2 years later, when a year later, COVID happened and we were messaging and I really wanted to see them. So in 2021, I researched how can I go to South Korea? Not as a tourist because I wanted to stay more than 90 days. And they said, you can teach English in South Korea. So I did research.
mm,
I found EPIC, which is the English program in Korea, and I applied and I got in. And that's why I wanted to go to Incheon because they lived in
mm.
Seoul at the time. And Incheon it's like an hour
That's very
commute.
far.
It is far. I thought it was closer, but it's far. You learn a lot about the geography of the country when you're in there. But instead I got placed in Goesan and I was like, I'm so sad because I didn't know anyone in the
Mm.
province. But it was a blessing because I got to meet my really good friend that Sam knows, Shimon.
Shimon, shout out to Shimon. Yes.
Yes. She lived in the town next to me, which was about a 25
Mm,
minute bus ride or like a 20-minute drive. I got to experience a different side of South Korea, not the bustling, hustling part of Seoul or Busan, but like the countryside because Korea is not just city, city, city. It is I think 70% mountains, like it's
Yeah,
nature.
7% mountain nature. Yeah.
And it's beautiful, like, and you get to meet, well, you get to hear the different accents too, because like
Mm-hmm.
supposedly Chunjokbakdo has an accent. I couldn't tell. I don't have a good ear for accents, but my coworkers would tell me, yeah, like our principal, he has a really thick
Chungcheongdo
Chunjokbakdo
accent,
yeah,
dialect.
Chuncheong accent. And I said, how? And they would like rip, imitate him. And I said, okay, I thought that was just his thing, but that's the accent.
Mm.
And learning about chili peppers and that every town has like Cheongju is known for no, Cheongju is known for their apples, Goesan is known for chili peppers, and that every town has their own festival for that
Mm-hmm.
fruit or vegetable, which I love. And so yes, so I decided the first year I knew I was going to do 2 years, but I decided to extend from 2 years to 3 years because my first year
Mm.
students in middle school were graduating and I didn't want to miss that. So I stayed a third year so I could see them graduate and then I went back home after my third year.
Wow. Okay. It was so memorable for you.
Yes.
Wow, I actually didn't know that. That's the main reason you stayed the 1 year longer than
Yeah.
you planned. Okay. Sounds great. Okay. Kayla, by the way, I have to confess one thing
Uh,
about Goesan. I actually didn't know how famous the Goesan chili pepper is. I only see the statue. I still remember the
yes.
very big chili pepper statue when I traveled there, and I was so surprised.
They're really proud of it.
And I also know that Goesan has a really good farm for apple.
Uh-huh.
So my parents sometimes buy some the apples made from Goesan. I still remember that. And I don't know when I heard the word Goesan, it just remind me of you all the times. You are the one of representative person of Goesan. Shout out to Goesan. The Kayla will be the one of the how can I explain it? That one of the foreign representative of the place. So yeah, they will consider you like that. Great. Yeah. Wow. It's a really beautiful and great story, your journey of Korea. And I also want to know about it. What was your first stereotype that you have regarding the Korea? So because I still remember when you first think about the Korea,
Mm,
you think there are some of the monkeys
yes.
around the jungle, right?
I did. The first time in 2019, it was a group
Mm,
of 5 of us. We had never heard like, okay, I don't wanna say we never heard of South Korea. We knew of South
mhm,
Korea, but we've never traveled to Asia in general. So most of us traveled, North America, maybe Europe, South America, which most people from the US do. Many don't visit Asia or Africa or Australia.
mhm.
So it was our first time. So I was expecting, "Oh my gosh, the jungle, monkeys everywhere. We're gonna see a tiger, like we're gonna be in a safari car." No, we
Tiger,
come in
okay.
like
Yeah, you can see them in the zoo actually, but
yeah. And history-wise, you did have tigers at one point. So like
exactly.
it is true. But yeah, and when we came and I'm like, "Where are the monkeys? Where are the tigers? Where's the jungle?" And that's when we realized, oh, South Korea is very developed.
Mhm,
It has cities and it's very developed and the people are not jungle people. You are city people. And there's countryside, but the countryside is still just farming. It's not like a jungle. So that was a
mhm.
big cultural difference for the first time. And we did a lot of research our first night. Like we were wrong. And another culture shock was you eat a lot of rice and meat, which I'm
Yeah.
not complaining. I love that. But some of my teammates, they're like, I want a salad. And you can't really get a salad unless you get maybe bibimbap or like the
Mm,
side dishes. So that was a culture shock that meat, well, rice is on the menu and is on the table every meal, and meat as well. There's some type of meat, which I love, and sharing because in American culture, we don't share food like that. Like you want a piece,
mm,
here's a plate, and I'll put it on the plate for you to eat from. But
mm.
in South Korean culture, or many Asian cultures actually, you share food. You get a dish and you share it, or if everyone gets their own, you can share a little bit of each other's dish. So that was
Mm-hmm.
another culture shock because we don't like germs and personal space is very important. But now
No.
I see it as a sense of community and it's really nice. So yeah,
Yeah.
those were three culture shocks.
Okay. Even though I'm Korean, I don't like to share my food actually.
Okay, yay.
Yeah, because I actually uh yeah, I cannot see the jump, but I
Mm,
know the jump. Yeah, right. And also after the COVID, I am very sensitive about the immune things.
mhm.
So I never expect that someone share the foods. I just refuse maybe.
Yeah.
Even though my family, my father and my mother, when they want to share some food, when they eat some, I don't want it just to put it. Maybe our culture is a little different these days after
Mm,
the COVID situation, but it
yeah.
depends actually.
Mhm. Do you share with
So
your wife?
a little,
Uh, ooh.
but we are very careful about the sharing food and touching something with my kids
Mm,
because we know uh, the teeth germs, like
mhm.
the cavity is coming from the adult's teeth.
Oh,
So yeah, we never, we just popo like the cheek to cheek, but
yeah.
never do it by our lips to lip.
Okay.
So even though my kiddos are now the months years
Mhm.
old, but we don't have a chance to, the kiss lip to lips. We are very watching out not to make
Yeah.
them have, some the cavity things. So
I
that's the
didn't know
same
that.
actually. We don't share foods at all.
That's good though. I don't have kids, but the popo, yeah, because even though we're adults, we are dirty. And I
Yeah.
didn't know that the cavities came from that, but it makes sense. So good to know.
Right. So, Kayla, I think I have to make the editing this part, but
Mhm.
even, like the couple, time after time, at first we are very romantic. So
Mhm.
even though we eat something and we didn't, brush our teeth, we can just kiss. But these days, we know how dirty our inside of the mouth. So when we just face like some romantic situation, we just say we have to brush our teeth first
Yeah.
if you want to, if you want
Good,
to kiss
good.
me.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, that's the common thing these days. Okay. All right. How's your life in Korea? So what were your favorite thing and what were your the dislike things?
So I really liked the
Mm-hmm.
convenience of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I was in a rural town, I still could get to Seoul in 2 hours, direct bus. I could get to Cheongju in an hour. Public transportation was so easy. Like, I live in
Mm.
New Jersey, so I'm very close to New York City. Public transportation is not easy. It's very difficult.
Mm.
Access in South Korea for those who have like walking issues or disabilities, very good. Trains were always on time, very clean. I miss that. The convenience store open 24 hours. Sometimes if I want a
Mm.
snack, it's 10 o'clock. I'm hungry. Let me get some ramen. And I walk 5 minutes because there's a convenience store on every corner, which I
Mm.
love. Here, there is no convenience store. If I want to go to the market, it's about a 10-minute walk.
10-minute walk, okay.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I live pretty close, but if where I
Mm.
used to live, it's about a 20-minute walk or 25-minute walk.
Wow. You're
It's
gonna be very hungry while you're working.
I mean, there's DoorDash here. I forget in Korean. Pid.
배달의 민족.
Yes. Yes. That was great too because let me tell you, the delivery service in Korea is fast.
Mm.
In Seoul though, because in my town in Goesan, there were only 5 places that I could order from, while in Seoul you have thousands. So I miss the convenience of it all. I miss that I could leave Friday, go to Seoul for the weekend, come back Sunday, or if I wanted to go to Busan, or if I wanted to go to Daegu or Jeju
Mm.
even, it was great. I always remember, even though Korea is a small country, really advanced. And I love that culture is present in everything, in the flag, in the folklore, um, in the identity. I really, really like that. Um, and the PC bunks. I experienced it for the
PC방.
first time with my brother. I should have done it my first year. It was the best thing ever. Changed my life. Playing video games and ordering food. What? I was so scared. That was one thing, I tell my students, get the
Mhm.
confidence. I'm also scared because I was like, how do I work the machine? How do I ask for a
Mm.
computer? How do I pay
Mm.
for hours? I was so scared. So I had to go with my brother and he walked in
Okay.
confident, and then he looks at me, translate. I have to translate. He's like, yeah, you know Korean, translate. But the good thing about Korea is it's always a machine, almost always a machine. So you don't have to talk to someone, which was amazing. So that was
Okay.
easy. But yeah, PCbangs were life
Yeah.
changing.
The PC방, I have a different way of fears if I want to go to PC방
Mm.
because I'm an old man to go there these days. So I totally forgot when was the last time I went to PC방. But yeah, the 3 years ago, I still remember one time I had to make some print.
Mhm.
I had to get the paper things for my contract.
Mhm.
So there was no place that I can make some print. So I went there near to the PC방 and I struggled how to use it. Everybody stared at me because I'm the old people only standing in front of the lobby and everybody is just, they're playing a video game and they're just staring at me and
Mm.
I just struggled and one student, maybe the high school student just that worked over to me and he taught me how to use it. At the
That's
time,
cute.
I felt like I feel my age.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah, I
so
was
funny.
like the old lady in front
Mm.
of the kiosk these days,
Mm.
That was
Like,
what I feel. Yeah, so sad.
I mean,
What was you? Go
kudos
ahead.
to the high school student helping you. Um, because not many Korean people do that. They don't. That's one thing I don't like is many people don't
Mhm.
open the doors or help you. Um,
Mm.
and I know it's a cultural thing that many people don't do that. And I know it's a protection thing because of, the people suing other people.
Mhm.
So I know a lot of Koreans are on guard and how they help other people.
Yeah. So exactly. Is it your one of dislike things in Korea, or you want to say more?
That's one of my dislike things.
Okay.
I have more. I have so much more. I have a lot of good things and a lot of things I don't like.
Okay. So these days, what I observed about the protection things,
Mm.
on the street, this is just so bad these days because no one trusts each other, especially in city. I
Mhm.
mean, let's say I am commuting and someone just asked me to help with something, but I'm very busy. I
Mm.
have to go my place on time. I just refuse, turn
Yeah.
down some requests. And also, some strange people
Mhm.
asked me something, and I'm just always suspicious.
Mhm.
They are like the cult, or they just try to sell something to me. So I sometimes just ignore them.
Mm.
So I think that's the one social problem these days. No one trusts each other. So maybe the old people, someone who gets some help from the young people is really tricky these days.
I agree.
Yeah, that's the really bad things. Okay. Is there one more thing maybe you want to tell about your dislike things in Korea when you lived in here? Yeah, tell me more.
Ajishis. The
아저씨,
uncles
okay.
are nasty. I mean, this is in every country, and every culture, so it's not just South Korea because my dad, who is Hispanic, does the same thing. It's so gross.
Okay.
But the spitting, so gross. One thing, South Korea is very safe and it can be very clean. But there are certain alleys that
Hmm.
are disgusting, like cigarette butts, and that's of course
Yeah.
where it's the peachy bongs or the nightclubs or like the gaming alleys, or even in university areas, like they'll have those
Mm.
alleys or streets. But the ajishis are nasty. They spit. I don't like that. So gross. And they don't care. But again, it's a cultural thing. They were allowed to do it. No one's corrected them really, so they do it. Disgusting. So don't put your bag on the floor. People don't do that.
Yeah.
Ugh, gross. Also don't like that Koreans don't help each other because it is a trust issue. But they trust to leave their phone on the table when they go to the bathroom, which I miss because if you're by yourself, you can't save your own seat. You have to go get your food and
Mm.
then come back and sit down. But in Korea, you can leave your purse, your phone, a notebook, and people know, okay, it's reserved by someone else. And I never experienced this. And I think it's because I use the foreign card, but I don't like the intensity of work expectations on
Mm-hmm.
Korean people. I know someone, a mutual friend. She is, I think, 22, but I'll text her and we have meetings at 8 a.m. and she's in South Korea and the meetings at 8 a.m. is 10 p.m. for her. She's like, "Oh, my boss asked me to work late." And I'm like, "Sua, it is 10 p.m. You're still at work?" And she's like, "Yeah, cuz she's a first year office worker." And
Mm.
the first year office workers are kind of expected to stay overtime. And I'm like, what? I don't like that. I think that's
Yeah.
very stressful.
Wow. It happens these days as well? Wow. Okay.
And anyone who watches K drama and think that's not true, it is true. Especially if you're on the low level, like it is true. And so, like as a foreigner, there's also hueshik, which is the company dinner. I
Yep.
actually enjoyed that. I don't like my first hueshik. I was so scared because we went to Korean barbecue, which I love. So I ate a lot of meat. And then they're like, "Oh, the night is young." Mind you, it's like 8 p.m. and we started at 5.
Mm.
Let's go to the bar. And so we went to like a bar, but it was like a social bar. So like they were
Mm.
having peanuts and
Mm.
some side dishes.
Yeah, snacks.
Snacks, yeah. With what's it called? Like I know picchu is beer, but what's the
Soju?
soju too? But what are the snacks called in Korean? Yeah, but when it comes with beer, it has a different name. But they were I forgot, but they
안주.
there you go, anju.
안주. Yes,
They're like
안주.
picchu, soju, anju. And so I don't drink, so I was like cola for me. And we were there so we finished at the Korean barbecue at 8. We were there. Me and 3 other women teachers. We didn't leave
Mm.
till 10:30, but they had stayed
Mm.
there till 11.
Yeah.
And then they went
Yep.
to karaoke bar until like 1 a.m. And then this was on a Thursday and Friday everyone came to work and like pretending nothing happened. And some people had headaches and their eyes were red and they were drinking the energy,
Energy.
the
Yeah.
vitamin C.
Like the silver. Yeah. Yeah. The
Yeah, the
silver free.
hangover drinks.
Yeah. Hangover. Yeah. Right.
And I'm like, "So are we gonna talk about yesterday?" And they're like, "We never talk about it." So that was that's
Yeah.
one of my least favorite things. As someone who
Mm.
likes boundaries with work and personal life, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
Korea does blur that with hueshiks.
Yeah. Very, very
And
blur. Yeah.
and when the principal or the manager or supervisor or the boss and you drink, gives you a drink, you have to take it. I'm like, "What?" And you can't
Yeah.
refuse. You can't refuse unless you're a foreigner. Because like if you're a foreigner, then who
Mm.
doesn't drink, then okay. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the big pressures when I was the very low level of employees.
Mhm.
And my one of manager, he pushed me to work until 10 p.m. all the time. Actually 11, even though I don't have something, but he asked me just to pretend to work. Pretend to work because if you want to get a great
Mm,
the performance, the evaluation from the manager, you just stay until they go home and then
mhm,
you just go home after them. So it was so bad things. And my X companies, one of compensation was that they can just reimburse the
mhm,
taxi fee when I take the taxi at not at after 11 p.m. So
mhm.
I have to stay at company until 11 p.m. and then I take a taxi to go home almost every day for 1 year. So it's really crazy. Yeah, it
That's
happened. But it
Yeah,
was
that's
like almost 12 years ago. But wow, based on your friend's story, it happens these days. It's so
mhm.
crazy.
Yeah, like, even at my school, like, the teachers, like, almost all the teachers were great teachers, but there was this
Mm,
one guy teacher, I think it's his plan to become, like, vice principal and principal, so he stays late, and he's also would not leave until the principal left or the vice principal left. So, he was doing it for his own gain,
mm-hmm,
but sometimes other teachers would leave on time, like 3:30 or 4 o'clock, you're out. And so some teachers gossip about that teacher
mm,
too. Be like,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
she left early, like how dare she, blah blah. And I really liked
Right.
her. She was the art teacher and she had so many responsibilities. She was a homeroom teacher, art
Mm-hmm,
teacher. She had to organize the art festival, organize many things, do the field trip for the third graders, like, it was a lot, and she also taught at other schools because almost every teacher have to go to another school to teach,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
like their travel school. And she was doing that, and so she barely had time to herself, and her time is, "I'm gonna leave on time and go home," but then
Mm-hmm.
that's looked at as, "You're not committed to the school or the culture," and
So sad. That's
yeah.
the social pressure as well. It's a really bad. Sometimes I feel like the Korea's company is like the army. There is like the
Mhm,
hierarchy. So everybody is like the soldier and just, the obey the manager like the real, the high level boss.
mhm.
So it's a really bad things. But I'm so sad because the hierarchy still remain. Yeah,
Yeah.
in
I
here,
think
so
I think maybe Gen Z is changing it a little bit because
maybe.
I remember some of the students, like, when the Ajishis or the Ajumas would be like, "Yeah," and they'll be like, "Why are you talking to me like that?" "No, I was here for," like, they're like, "You want respect? Give me respect, and I'll give you respect. Don't expect respect when you're not
Great.
respecting me," kinda thing. So I did see
Yeah, I
that.
like that attitude.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, they're standing up for themselves. I do
Mhm,
like that. And it's not that they don't respect the older people because I have seen them give up their seats on the bus for the
mhm,
older people. And I was like, oh, you are some good kids. But then some of my students wouldn't do that. And so I would force them. I'm like, get up.
mm,
She's
mhm.
standing, and they're like, "Oh." I'm like, "You're young, you're fine." So sometimes they're able to be respectful, and other times they have to be told to be respectful. But I
Yeah,
do
right.
like that some of them stand up for themselves when they're not being respected, and the
Mhm.
other person is demanding respect, but not given respect.
Okay, cool. Uh, Kayla, yeah, so I actually didn't expect our recording is over 1.5, but I still have a couple of questions for you. Are you okay, by the way?
I just feel bad for you because I know it's almost midnight for you.
No, it's fine. I really appreciate your time because you're gonna make my word of content, so
Yeah,
I'm so happy.
anytime.
I'm so happy. Okay, all right. So what has been the biggest challenge of living here as a foreigner in Korea? What was the most helpful things?
It definitely was the language. It's always the language barrier because all the apps are in Korean. And so if I want to buy a bus ticket, I have to know where to buy it on the app. If I want to do a delivery service of food
Mm-hmm.
or of like G Market, which is like all my Americans, Amazon, you have to know Korean. You have to know where it is because not they don't always have a global option for
Mm-hmm.
English. But it's not only navigating the applications, it's also navigating conversations. And like at the hospital, especially in Goesan, not many speak English. So the
Mm-hmm.
time that I actually met a doctor that spoke English, I was like, oh my gosh, the post office too. Everything is in Korean. And
mm,
fortunately, I met someone who spoke English, and he actually, every time he saw me, he would do my order and tell his
mm,
coworkers, like, "Don't worry about it. I will work with her." And he got to practice his English. And I said, "Your English is so good." He's like, "No, it's not." And one thing Koreans are is they're kind of humble and saying, "No, my Korean's not. My English is not good." I'm like, you could talk to me. So definitely the language barrier because it's
mm-hmm.
not only navigating Korean life, it's also connecting with the people and
Mm-hmm.
coworkers and students because it can be kind of isolating when you only know three phrases and they only
Yeah.
know three phrases and you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, have a good day. Because my coworkers at my school really included me in everything. So like after lunch we would have coffee in the nurse's office and we were all young, so it was really nice. It was five of us. And they would talk in Korean.
Mm,
And I just like, even if I didn't understand, I liked being part of the group. And
mm,
so
mm-hmm.
sometimes they'll be like, "Do you understand?" I'm like, "No, but I like just being in the same room
Just
as
the
you."
vibe.
Yeah, just vibing, seeing you laugh, like, "You're fine." They're like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "Yeah, don't worry about me."
Mm.
What else?
Kayla, based on your story, you did your best.
Yeah.
Whether you 100%, can understand what they are talking about, but you were just trying to be there to feel
Because
the vibe and inclusive things.
mhm.
Wow. I didn't
It's
know how much you input your effort for the.
I've, one thing that's my mom has had my parents actually have instilled. I don't know about I think my older brother and I. My younger brother takes time
Mm,
to adapt, but my older brother and I can
mm-hmm,
adapt really well in different situations. And
mm-hmm,
we are more social than my younger brother. So even if
mm,
I'm not understanding, can socially I can adapt to it
mm.
and participate. Yeah, like with my apartment, I hate my apartment. I hated it so much, but I was adaptable. I was flexible. I lived there for 3 years, but in the EPIC program, the school provides an apartment. And my apartment
Mm-hmm,
was in an old, funny enough, one of the best in Goesan, but still old. So the walls are thin, so you can hear your neighbors using the bathrooms or talking.
mm,
You can hear them
mm-hmm,
walking. And that's one thing that was a challenge for me is knowing I can hear everyone's business and they can hear mine
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and the culture of you do not speak to them really, like you don't talk to your neighbors, and if they're loud you leave a note, you don't address them. But one of the challenges that I did in Korea that
mm-hmm.
many people don't do is I use the foreign card all the time, so I'm like, oh, I'm a foreigner, so I didn't know this cultural no, so I would talk to my neighbors and ask them like, can you please like lower the volume, please stop stomping.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a challenge is living in a apartment with these cultural expectations of you don't address your neighbor. You just deal with your situation. If it sucks, deal with it. I don't like that
Mm-hmm.
because home is where you want to be relaxed and that's your safety. And it didn't become that.
Right.
But yeah, but I adapted to it because I'm flexible, but after my 3rd year, I couldn't I went home for family reasons, but another reason was I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore.
Mm, okay. Yeah, it sounds so tough. Yeah, but I can feel you hanging there, and now you are here, right?
Yeah.
But I really like your attitude. You are so flexible, and also you are so adaptable. So you are adaptive. So yeah, I think that for the listener, I hope everybody just can get the attitude like her, Kayla here. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Okay. We're gonna move to the other topic, the insight from your perspective. You've been living in Korea for 3 years, and
Uh-huh.
I think you already noticed that Korea is not that very diverse, right?
Yes.
So maybe you have something you wanted to tell the Korean people what things they have to learn from your culture and vice versa.
Advice to Korean people?
Yep, advice to Korean people.
Okay. I would say continue embracing global engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So that means if you see a foreigner that you know is a foreigner in Korea, talk to them. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one thing I have learned is as a foreigner, I've really adapted to Korean culture and don't talk to me, don't look at me, personal space. So at times, if you do talk to a foreigner in Korea, they might look at you weird, especially if they lived there for more than 2 years. Because now they've
Mm-hmm.
adapted to how Koreans are socially. And so they're probably like, why are you talking to me? But in the beginning, they probably would have been like, oh my gosh, a Korean is speaking to me. I get to speak to them. Because Simone had that experience, which she'll probably share.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So continue embracing global engagement. So talk with the foreigners in your city, your town, practice English speaking.
Practice English speaking.
make friends that are not just Korean, because I know there's still that fear of failing. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to judge me. Everyone's going to judge each other. Koreans judge each other all the time. So what's the
All the
difference what's the difference if a foreigner does it to you? I mean, Koreans do travel, but I think one thing I've noticed is they always revert back to a Korean restaurant when they're traveling. They need their kimchi, they need their bulgogi or bibimbap. Try the foods in that country
like there's
and
something new
try
at the
something
your
new.
area.
Mhm. Like, I feel like I fully adapted into Goesan. Like, I went to the restaurants, I spoke to the people, I went to the Goesan go to a Chukje, the festival. As for the Korean people, do the same if you're living in Australia or another country. Immerse yourselves in there and show people your cultural identity as well. Like, where is
Mm-hmm.
Korea? Because people ask this stupid question, North Korea or South Korea, when you say you're from Korea all the time.
It's so cliche.
Yes, and so you'll always get that. So of course, just no, I'm from South Korea. But then that could lead a conversation because there are some people who don't know the history of
Mm-hmm.
North and South Korea. And then yeah, for the young people, the young Korean people, your voice matters. So speak up, and don't
Mm-hmm.
silence yourself out of fear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't let yourself make mistakes, especially in
Mm-hmm.
English speaking.
Yeah. Thank you. Very nice. Okay. This is the last question for you. What is your life motto for the life to share it with this podcast audience? I think you are prepared about it.
Well, I have several models. You can edit this down
Okay.
that I came up well, I didn't come up with, but, like, I was thinking, like, how um, to use I don't know, like, model to share with the people. Be adaptable,
Mm-hmm.
be flexible,
Mm-hmm.
have boundaries
Have boundaries. Okay.
still
It's
because
a little, opposite
I
the
know,
meaning of what you said.
because
Explain
when
more.
So when I came back from South Korea, I was very to my job, like very submissive. And so when I was telling my mom about that, she's like, "Yeah, South Korea has changed you to not use your voice, to be very you adapted to Korean culture so well that you kind of lost your who you are a little bit coming back to
Mm,
United States. You're not as bold in speaking and you just say yes to the things people are asking you. You're a great teacher, but you think you're not because South Korea kind of like these standards are so high. Like,
mm,
yes, be flexible and be adaptable, but also have boundaries.
mhm,
So you don't lose your identity when adapting or being flexible. Stay true to yourself as
mm,
well.
mm,
It doesn't mean accept everything and do everything, pick and choose, because there are some foreigners who don't adapt well because they are
mm,
too they're holding on to what they know and their identity too strong, and that's kind of like not allowing them to communicate or come into the Korean society or education
mhm, mhm,
enough, so they become isolated or they don't have much friends.
mm,
So I do think it's important to be adaptable and flexible, but have boundaries so you're not pushed
mm.
to lose yourself, your identity, and your values. Yeah, I hope that was
Yeah,
the explanation.
but that's a really great one for me actually. The adaptive, flexible, and also have the boundary is a really great. It sounds like to me like you have to make some balance, right? Yeah, because I don't know. This is the relatable experience that I have, but it depends on people. But my case, I'm the type of person sometimes can make the clear boundary.
Hmm.
While I'm working, when I was very, the low level of like the junior level of employee,
Mhm.
I think I just live up to the other people's expectation. I mean, my boss or my colleagues, they think like the Uni is like the very kind, Uni is like very humble, and Uni is like very silent, and everybody just consider me like that. And also sometimes, even though I'm not that type of person, but I just act like that.
Hmm.
And one day I just break my image, and they
Uh-huh.
were very surprised, and they said like you are changed.
Ah.
Yeah. So I don't know. This is the related example that you described. As you said, we have to be very adaptive and flexible on the situation, but you lose your identity. You have to have your boundary. So you just face everything by yourself to the people and don't lose your identity things. So that's what I want to say based on your life model. Mhm. Okay. Kayla, do you have something more you want to say to the audience, maybe?
Continue supporting like living in Korea.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Kayla.
Thank
And I
you.
hope, yeah, you will join this show once again.
Yes, please. Thank
All
you.
right. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Okay. Bye.